It's Dennis and Stephen here again from burgundywine.com at the Domaine de Cru, the home of Eldon Selections. And we are coming to you this evening with a tasting of Chateau Cary Potet, but the label is saying Chateau de Chamy.
It's very strange tasting.
I think this story goes back to the very origins of Eldon Selections.
It definitely does. It goes back a long way. We met a fellow named Charles de Bessay at one of the very first Grands Jours de Bourgogne. And he made Montagny 1er Cru white. And we fell in love with the wines. We got in touch with him because we wanted to be able to represent his wines on our paper copy newsletter that we used to send out. And we got to know him pretty well. He liked our car. He said he was very French. He was a man from another era, sort of tatty aristocracy. Lived in a fabulous old rundown chateau in the southern part of Burgundy. And we learned a lot about wine, and we learned a lot about life from him. And even though sometimes he was a little bit impatient with our youthful impetuosity and American ways, but we hit it off. It was a good relationship, and we loved the wines. But he died, and we lost him, and little by little we lost the wines too. We figured at some point someone would pick up the baton, and there'd be some sort of relay between the Charles Cary Potet and the future. But a decade went by and we heard nothing, so we just thought it was gone.
And one day you're in the supermarket.
And one day Ellie and I are walking down the aisle of a supermarket, and there's the Cary Potet label, just like it was. I mean, just like we're thinking, of all places, a supermarket. So we went up and grabbed it, and in the fine print at the bottom it said, produced by Chateau de Chamy. So which was an unknown entity to us at the time. So we got in touch with the Chateau de Chamy and met Véronique Desfontaines and her two sons, Xavier and Arnaud. Turns out they're sixth generation winemakers in the valley between Fontenay and Mercure. And they've got another beautiful chateau in the southern part of Burgundy. But we went and said that we used to represent Cary Potet in the United States, and she didn't cry, but she nearly cried, Madame Desfontaines. Turns out that she was the compagnon, the partner of Charles de Bessay, and when he died, she and her sons took over the production of Cary Potet, but never used the name, except that Charles had a contract with a supermarket chain, long-standing and still valid, where they brought a certain amount of wine every year. So they produced this label for Cary Potet just for this supermarket wine, which of all things was like, wasn't exactly it wasn't the image of Eldon wine at the time, but the wine was fabulous. As a matter of fact, the sons, Xavier and Arnaud, make fabulous wine. It's as good, if not better, than what Charles de Bessay made. So we presented the wines under the name under the Chateau de Chamy label for a couple of years. But then I said, any possibility that we could use the old label? And they were. For us, it was sentimental. For them, they were thinking like, this would be very cool. So now we have these very same wines, Montagny 1er Cru Bernard and Les Jardins and Les Bernard, both of them 1er Cru, in the old original Cary Potet label, and it's a tie to the past, and for us a sort of sentimental connection.
And a nice dinner story when you serve the wines.
Yeah, you could. In the time it takes, you could drink a bottle in the time it takes to tell it.
So we do a lot of these side by sides, and they're great fun. And so Montagny itself, great value, certain type of minerality, Côte Chalonnais.
they're very floral. They're very suave. But they have a minerality almost. You'd almost say like a left bank Chablis kind of thing, that kind of thing. That sort of.
The Jardin definitely has a little bit brighter minerality, I think. But the type of minerality.
Brighter, you mean like sort of
like tighter.
Yeah, flinty.
Yeah.
Yeah, smokier.
Yeah. There's a lot of Premier Cru in Montagny, and a lot of mediocre wines, I find. But when you get a good producer, it really is hard to beat some of the value that's there.
You get the attack on this. This is
the burner.
In the nose, you get it right away. It's like orange blossom. It's got a fatness in the middle, but it's not. It's got great acidity. It's not flabby. The acidity, the minerality carries the fruit forward.
Yeah,
it's a classy wine. Both of them really.
But again, when you get the two side by side, you can taste the difference in the terroir, and I think that is such great fun when you do that. I mean, personally, I would open the two rather than two of the same. I would, because I just really think that's interesting when you get the two side by side, and you get this kind of more.
Well, yeah,
precise minerality and this kind of
at the table to see how one plays off the other. We do a lot of that sort of thing too. I mean, if you have two wines from the same producer that are similar, to open them both and do a comparison.
And the winemaking technique generally is 12 months in oak, 6 months assemblage.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot more of that these days. There's the idea that you leave the wine in the barrel for 12 months is not unusual in itself. But when they do the assemblage, in other words, when they put it all together at the end, all the different barrels, they'll put it into a big tank, which they call the French say they put it en masse. So you have a huge mass of wine, but they'll let it sit for a long time. Here it's up to 6 months.
That's a long time. Yeah.
And the idea there is that it melds and comes together, and that they say the producers that we're talking to these days say that's what gives you that. You can have minerality, but that time in mass gives you the tension.
Yeah, and you really it's interesting because you never stop learning with wine. Will I? And it's just when you the more you talk to the winemakers, the more they give you these little and big techniques and secrets.
It's fantastic. This is for us. This is like. It's a journey through time, and to think that these wines have ended up, they're just down the road from us. They're not very far right now from the Chateau de Chamy, and we've become good friends. And in a way, we have sort of almost like we feel like there's a family connection because of the Charles de Bessay history and the Cary Potet. So it's very elderly.
Yeah.
It's just
and the food pairing. I mean, these are big wines. When you hit them in the right drinking window, they really do deliver. And so, they have oak and balance in them, so they can take some pretty intense food dishes. And we cured some wild salmon that Ellie got hold of at the Poissonnière, and we'll show that process on our video. And we've paired it with like a trio of fennel and a bit of orange, which actually really ties in with this.
I mean, I'd go with this one on that, but it's a fabulous dish.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's the curing almost glazes it.
Yeah. And then we just quickly pan sear it. So again, check out that recipe video. When we do these tasting videos, we always try and do a pairing recipe video to help you guys along with these food and wine experiences.
That's what we do here at the Domaine de Cru. Eldon Selections, home in Burgundy, and have a look at what we do on www.burgundywine.com.
Yeah,
and
our Facebook and Instagram, Eldon Selections.
Oh, and more and more on the YouTube. So you should really have a look at the YouTube stuff. There's some great stuff going on there.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and I think dinner's nearly ready.
Yeah. Cheers. As always.